So with Venti's rerun basically around the corner, I thought I'd give my opinion on his current state in the game. As of right now, he's kind of okay. I still use him basically in every comp because I don't have Kazuha, but both Kazuha and Venti are very strong units in the game. Venti's has some issues because all the enemies that have been introduced lately have anti-Venti properties, so they don't get sucked in by his burst. They don't aren't affected by him, but essentially, so I've got a C0 Venti. I'm 8, 10, 10. Currently, I'm using Skyward Harp because I prefer the consistency over Stringless. Artifacts here, I've got a HP Flower, Crit Rate, Element Mastery. It's a bad flower overall, but it's got Element Mastery. Crit Rate and Element Mastery are basically the only things that really matter on Venti. So Crit Rate, Element Mastery, Attack Percent, and Energy Recharge. Really good Feather, really bad Element Mastery roll, which is unfortunate. Side grade Feather with higher Element Mastery, Attack, and Crit Damage, but no Crit Rate, so this is less consistent, but higher damage. I've got a Element Mastery Timepiece, that's basically all that really matters, but it's got 2% crit rate, which, wow, 2%. My other ones basically include this Attack Percent 1, crit rate, not great. Then this one I have gone Sucrose, which is a crit, and it's not great. And then I've got another one with crit and Element Mastery, but it doesn't really matter because it's not ideal. And then I've got this Animal Goblet with 21% crit damage, 5.8% crit rate, and 5.8% energy recharge. Nearly perfect, except for this HP percent, which is just awful. And then I've got two hats here. I'm using the technically worst one of the two because it's got 91 Element Mastery, 31% crit rate, 7.8% crit damage, and then a perfect God piece here of 31%, 7.8, 16.9%, and 54 Element Mastery. So lower Element Mastery, but every stat here is perfect, best in slot. It literally can't really do any better than this one. And so weapon-wise, I've got a Skyward Harp, a Stringless rank 3, Viridescent Hunt, Favonius, and Raven Bow. I did not get Windbloom Ode because I wasn't there during the event. I do have Polar Star, but it's technically worse overall compared to using just Skyward Harp, just because you don't really get the full benefit from this thing. So I just use Skyward Harp anyway, and so the big thing here is Venti has a issue with endgame. That's basically the only problem right now. Is his current status is endgame is his downfall in a lot of cases, just because in all cases Kazuha just is actually way better in endgame statuses than Venti is. Mostly because everything Venti does is he lifts things off the ground, and if things can't get lifted off the ground, then it basically becomes useless, because that's where all of his utility is on his lifting potential. So even himself, this is like all for open world traversing, so everything is just about lift and not really about other utility. So just gonna kind of show it off in this domain. Ignore this because this is just the next banner, but so there's going to be a buff here which gives bonus physical damage, but it's not really too big of a deal. I'm going to toss on a Zhongli shield, toss on Venti, get a couple auto attacks. You can see that I'm hitting like 1,400 to like 3,600. overall. Toss this back down here. And then his instacast, that was a 14k crit. 12k crit.
Brace yourself.
Another 13k crit.
Wouldn't gliding.
Gonna toss down a Zhongli shield. Another 14k crit. As you see, I'm not getting any non-crits because my crit chance is so high. But essentially, that's basically why I'm using Skyward Harpy, is because you get more consistency out of just all the crits.
Stabilize.
Here we go.
I got careless.
An 11k there. And then if I do a chart held one, that's a 18k, 17,887. Toss down his burst. It's going to be 1,388. And no swirl, so a lot of the swirl stuff kind of goes away, but I'm getting a lot of the physical procs from Skyward. Oh my god, he almost died. Okay, well, time to heal.
As a good night should. The more.
So generally, all of his stuff is just more consistent with all the crits. That's basically why I'm using his Skyward over Stringless. Stringless does have better numbers technically, but you kind of lose a lot when you go Stringless in some cases, just because his auto attack damage is just now really bad.
Wouldn't gliding be faster?
And once again, I'm just going to toss down a Zhongli shield.
There you are, eavesdropper.
So 12k crit.
Freeze.
Here we go.
6,800 non-crit.
Brace yourself. Wouldn't
12k
gliding be
crit,
faster?
6,800 non-crit. 9,700 crit.
Yahoo!
13,800.
Wouldn't gliding be faster?
I think that was affected by the Zhongli pillar, unfortunately.
Brace yourself.
6,800 non-crit again.
Blink.
So I'm just not critting. That's basically the big thing here is, if you don't crit, you basically lose a very large portion of damage with Venti. And that's generally the whole problem here is, without crits, Venti just can't do anything. Just do this. So,
Let's play.
well, technically, I should be doing a lot more damage with Stringless. I'm just not in practicality, which is kind of counterintuitive because Element Mastery should be working, but it's just the flat damage that's the problem. Is my Element Mastery isn't doing normal
You can get away.
things, so my burst did not target. That's one of the Venti's problems. But I've got 1,671, so about 300 damage more per hit on burst. But
Here we go.
it's not really ideal because it'll proc a couple times, so it just doesn't work. Now, the thing I'm kind of avoiding here is swirling, because it's gonna counter all the numbers I can get flat with
Wouldn't gliding be
this.
faster? Let's
So
play.
if I swirl everything, what happens is things will start to get a lot different. Because swirling damage is what a majority of Anemo users are for, and that's why Kazuha is so high priority, that's why Sucrose is so high priority, and that's why Venti kind of has a priority on that. The only problem though is you have no control over what elements you can swirl generally with Venti. You just kind of have to hope, and if something is elemental you get screwed over anyway, but I have to change my team comp here, I think, because as much as I like Raiden Shogun for general damage, especially with Venti pairing, it's going to interfere with damage procs, so I'm just going to... I think
I'll take care of it.
Yeah. I just toss in Barbara for that elemental application. Though I don't really have much interference with numbers. I know Zhongli is already interfering with numbers anyway, but it's just because there's a lot of damage and I need shields.
Gather.
So if I go into Barbara and I just kind of cast an auto attack, that's going to apply Hydro to do. And I'm going to cast my burst, and the Hydro is going to apply here, and now I have all these numbers here. So now I'm having all that 700 every time it procs on the Hydro. So
Brace yourself.
that's basically the main thing here, is the swirling ends up causing all these procs to just
Think you can
go
get
through
away?
the roof, and so every single one of these is way stronger than having just, well, Anemo by itself. So that's, once again, with that's 60% crit rate and 78% or 80% crit damage with 520 elemental mastery on doing that. And so if I swap to Skyward, it's gonna bring me to 82.3% crit rate and 98, well, basically 99% crit damage with 354 elemental mastery. The general elemental mastery range is 350 to 500 for optimal like building for artifacts and stuff. So I'm just barely hitting that range with my current artifacts, which is fine. So same build here is I'm just gonna go over here, pop a Zhongli shield, go to Barbara, swap, toss in one auto attack. Unfortunately, I don't have
Wouldn't gliding be faster?
energy here, so particles, please.
Time for
Toss this
takeoff.
out. It's gonna proc, and now I have 680 swirls with 1,700 Anemo damage. So overall, the damage ranges on Skyward was a lot better, and I believe
Think
I
you
was
can get
also getting
away?
those physical procs. So all those physical procs are from the Skyward. Yeah, so every time it procs the physical, that's even more damage coming out of the Skyward comparatively to the Stringless. So that's one of those things where, while technically Stringless has higher damage numbers,
Come on, we can
in
do it.
theory, in practicality, Skyward, because the crit consistency,
Let's play.
completely outstrips everything that the Stringless can do. And this is
Wouldn't
also
gliding
one of
be
the other
faster?
things is
I'll catch up.
there's
No stone unturned.
the elegy for the end, which is basically
Look at me.
I don't have one for myself, so I can't really test it, but it's technically supposed to be his best in slot in some ways, but I can't really do anything until I can test it myself. But as for right now, I don't see any benefit for me using Stringless compared to Skyward. And that's generally why I have my Venti built with the Skyward Harp overall, because it's just the damage numbers are much higher. The damage numbers are more consistent, especially considering I have really high crit rate. And since his whole thing is about having those procs do so much damage anyway, having the really high crit rate, just it's much more consistent just for having him out there with all those crits. While technically, yes, the Stringless should do more damage, it just doesn't because of how the crit rate and crit damage really affects consistency and damage ranges. So it could really be changed with how Venti is built, but if I go over to my spreadsheet here, just let me turn on the spreadsheet. Here we go. So on the spreadsheet I've got here is basically everything Venti needs. So he's got his Stringless here with Element Mastery. He's got the Elegy, and then he's got the really free-to-play friendly blue option in there. But the thing here is his optimal crit rate for an Element Mastery build is like 25 to 50%, just because that 1-to-2 ratio, crit damage of 1-to-2 ratio, and then a Element Mastery ratio of like 350 to 500. That's basically like for optimal stuff, because even, well, when I was using the Skyward, I was hitting 350 or so, and then with this I was hitting 520, so it's a range basically. Energy recharge of 170 to 200% will help you get your skill back fast enough to cast it again. And then his priorities for stuff is Element Mastery, crit rate, crit damage, energy recharge, and attack percent. Energy recharge has, of course, that priority just because you want your skills back as fast as possible, just so you can use them all the time. But Element Mastery, Anemo damage percent, because it helps you do more damage over Element Mastery. Just for Venti, in cases like Kazuha, you could see yourself using Element Mastery instead. But for Venti, Element Mastery for Hat and Timepiece are technically better, but if you want consistency, then you have to change up the build slightly. So the Barbados build, which I'm using right now, crit rate of the Skyward is like so good for this. I'm using an Element Mastery Sands because it's better, but technically attack percent could be a little bit better for the Barbados build just because. But you would still need Element Mastery in there because you can't lose Element Mastery on any piece basically, because it's a very vital part to Anemo support swirling. But crit rate, crit damage, energy recharge, once again. But the hat is basically the main difference here with how the build is, because Element Mastery, while it has better swirling, having crit rate gives you better consistency, and you get a massive crit boost from the hat. So that's basically the big thing here is if you get a perfect hat, then just use the perfect hat. But priority wise, this is where it gets a little bit weird here. So this is technically I've got it listed here as rank 1, rank 5 stuff, but rank 1, rank 5 kind of is a little bit different here for the 4-star, 5-star. So rank 5 Stringless is really good. Rank 5 Elegy, really good. But practicality, most players will have a rank 5 Stringless before they will have a rank 5 Elegy. So I've kind of started it based off Stringless mostly, and that's why Stringless is also the best in slot, because it's the most available. Then next is Windbloom, which currently locked until they re-release it or put it in the shop. But that's the next best in slot for him, just because it's got that Element Mastery boost. Then there's Alley, which is an attack one, but it's got off-field bonuses, I believe. So Alley Hunter is technically good at rank 5, but next in would be Elegy, which, while technically lower than all these, it's also basically next to the Stringless overall. And then next would be a rank 5 of the Raven Bow. But investing into a Raven Bow is kind of eh. And then behind that is a rank 1 of the Alley Hunter. However, while technically these are at the end, it's because they don't provide elemental mastery, which that's the thing here is you technically have less damage with these, but you have higher consistency ratios. And that's why I'm running the consistency ratios over burst ratios. And it's one of those things where you get higher damage per screenshot than you do with a consistency build with the crit rate. And that's kind of why I'm running Skyward over Stringless, especially because I have a rank 3 Stringless, which technically should be significantly better, but I'm just getting a lot lower numbers overall. And you can't really solve that unless you get like insane crit rate god pieces to have insanely high crit rate to be like 100% crit rate. Because if you have 100% crit rate and then you have all your pieces with elemental mastery on them, well, then technically Stringless is way better than Skyward. But until then, no, I don't like Stringless compared to Skyward. Now, the thing here is, because it's a Venti rerun, and it's also got Sucrose on there, and you have a couple options here. So, while Venti is good, there's also the Kazuha problem. Kazuha is up for rerun, basically next patch, which is the thing where he can basically run off an Iron Sting. He can run off just pure elemental mastery pieces. You don't have to worry about the crit rate or energy recharge or anything, because he's going to be more consistent just for the swirls, unlike Venti, where you have to really rely on that crit rate consistency. So that's the big thing here. His Freedom Sworn is probably going to be on the banner as well. So there's a lot of things with Kazuha compared to Venti where he doesn't need investment because all he needs is elemental mastery. He doesn't need like all this everything here of god pieces, crit rate ratios. So Kazuha compared to Venti, he's going to be a lot better consistency wise, and he doesn't rely on his skills requiring certain things. So these all rely on being able to lift a thing based on the weight, whereas these will yank things in regardless. And then there's also the fact is his main pull-in is on his skill and not his burst, whereas Venti's pull-in is on his burst and not his skill. So Kazuha has a lot better consistent damage wise anyway, because he can swirl his everything immediately, whereas Venti can't technically do that. It's just gonna cause some issues. So Kazuha has a lot more on Venti than Venti has. And the other problem is Venti has some targeting issues, and end game everything no longer, well, everything's basically been countered to Venti, and he hasn't been relevant ever since Kazuha came out. And Kazuha has basically outscaled him in every way on endgame, because his skills, his everything, his builds, and then just he's more compatible with everything at endgame ratios. And then there's Sucrose, which, well, Sucrose runs exactly the same as both Venti and Kazuha, and she's really easy to build anyway. And you just kind of got to invest into her skill and burst again. She only scales off elemental mastery. You don't need crit rate or anything. So she's basically going to be a very low investment but like high return kind of character. Getting her up is a bit of an annoying problem, just because leveling up characters in general sucks. But the big thing here is you just need an element to mastery book, whether it be me just close this and then go back to here. So I have I'm working on Sucrose myself, but I don't really have anything for her because it's all on Venti and whatnot. But you have options like Map of Mare, which has Elemental Mastery, and triggering Elemental Reaction gives Elemental Damage for 10 seconds. Or you can have the refreshing Sacrificial Fragments, Elemental Mastery, and whenever you cast an Elemental skill, you can refund that skill and cast it again. So these are basically her two best in slots overall. Something like the Woodsith doesn't really work on her because that's crit damage, and well, the debut stuff kind of is stupid. Solar Pearl, she doesn't use normal attacks, but if you do kind of normal attack, you could kind of increase your elemental skill and burst damage a little bit, but that kind of defeats the purpose of her being a elemental mastery swirler. So you just kind of want to invest into elemental mastery, and if you kind of want to use her passively, you could technically do Thrilling Tales, but this is useless basically for Sucrose. So her best in slots are going to be Sacrificial and Map of Mare. I use Sacrificial myself because I have almost 2 rank 5s of them, which incredibly bad luck. And I believe this is crafted, so getting books are very hard. Billets are very, very rare. So I would say Sacrificial is probably best bet here. And so her big thing here is just kind of comboing with her skill and burst, and then her bonus reaction here of everything with the matching element of the swirl will have their mastery increased by 50 for 8 seconds. Yeah, so this basically is why she's so relevant, is because she can just increase the potency of every single swirl proc. So investing into Sucrose overall, I think, is a really good option if you kind of don't go for Venti, but if you're like going for Ayato or something, because Sucrose she's a very, very, very budget friendly option for basically doing everything Venti can do, basically doing everything Kazuha can do, but without having to invest into weapons, investing into all the heavy artifacts that like Venti needs, where getting a god piece is very, very hard to get. And having like best in slot weapons and everything is not really that hard to get for Sucrose, just because you can have a Sacrificial. And then additionally there is a for Kazuha you can have Iron Sting, which pretty easy to get an Iron Sting, and this thing is really good for Kazuha just because it's elemental damage, increases all damage, and then elemental mastery. It's basically best of all worlds for Kazuha.